I mean, if you've seen on LouisRoR, there's like loads of people looking for developers and not that many developers in the market. You're probably asking what sort of qualifies me to be a Ruby on Rails recruiter. I actually got a Microsoft certification in it a couple of years ago. I highly recommend any recruiters that watch this to get in contact with Microsoft, who will teach you everything you need to know. I've got a lot of love and respect for DHH as well, so I thought Okay, so yeah, sometimes there's a sort of a fine line between like profound insights and like what's really self-evident and obvious. And if I mention anything which sounds kind of a bit condescending, it's because I see like teams like do these sort of mistakes on a very often, and it's yeah, it can quite easily be sorted out. So yeah, this talk, it's going to be kind of a mix of practical tips and kind of meta concepts that are going to help you make a better Rails team. People generally like the practical tips, but the meta concepts are probably a bit harder to put in place, but it's actually the sort of the overarching stuff that's going to give you sort of long-term success in building a Rails team. Just starting with a perfect interview, I recommend having a two-tier system with CVs. Quite often, I'll get a developer's CV, talk to them about sort of a whole host of companies. They'll be interested in 3 or 4. Of those 3 or 4, 1 or 2 will get back to me like within like half an hour, and then I've got other teams that will get back to me in sort of like in about a week and a half, and then that team that usually developers are off the market very quickly if they're decent. But yeah, obviously, if you're processing every CV, you're having an interview with every candidate, then it's going to take you like a hell of a lot of time. Whereas, I'd say with candidates that are obviously good on paper, get them in for an interview face to face as soon as possible. With candidates that you're kind of borderline, it's going to take a lot of time to go through everyone. Then I'd recommend doing a tech test, sort of phone interview with those guys. During an interview, like focusing on building the relationship, I think is by far the most important thing. Even if there's more teams, other teams which are technologically more interesting, or they've got a better actual kind of like product. If like actually getting on and building a friendship and people feeling like they can get on with a team, like I see in the vast majority of cases, is a greater pull towards a team than a team where people aren't sort of comfortable. Yeah, work out your pitch, but don't oversell your company and what sort of values you can give to developers. I've seen this a few times as well, that that companies will oversell, and then developers will look to kind of leave within a couple of weeks. And not with the people I place. And also like taking people out for lunch or after work drinks is I've seen like on a regular basis, which is quite effective if you get on with them, obviously. So delivering an offer, I'd say if you like a developer, don't go in and with a lowball offer, which happens quite often. Don't go under market rates. Get an idea for what they're looking for, and then give them sort of a couple of K on top of that. Generally, if you go in with a low offer, it kind of like just dampens the mood, and I can't actually think of a time when a company's given a low offer and then it's actually resulted in that developer taking that role. Yeah, so with this sort of employer-employee relationship, essentially it's a value in trade, time and effort for money. Determining value is a very subjective psychological process, and most people would see that the value an employee receives is predominantly coming in the form of money, but actually money is the sort of the lowest intrinsic value that a value can take. What I mean by this is that there's like the factors like flexibility, that in working arrangements, getting on with people, and other things that I'm going to discuss in a minute, actually like they can contribute more than money. And quite often money, it's more, yeah, it's a very kind of psychological thing. In a human trade, humans generally feel like they should like get a 50-50 during a trade. Humans feel like they should get kind of a 50-50 value. It's okay if you get more than that, but if you get less than 50% value, typically you're going to feel kind of hard done by. And essentially, because an employment contract, be it permanent or contract development, if you need to make sure that your developers are feeling like they're getting at least 50% value in this exchange. And again, if you're strapped for cash, it doesn't have to be cash, and it's got to be kind of like the whole package. So yeah, and rarely is it a conscious kind of process as well. So often both parties can be cognitively unaware of the real factors which contain traded value. These factors can still have a significant subconscious impact on the decision-making process of employers and employees. However, they will rationalize these decisions based on the apparent containers of value, despite not actually being the reality. So what I'm really trying to say here is if you've got developers which are not happy, which appear unhappy in their jobs, quite often it's like the actual real reason why that's happening isn't verbalized, and by being really conscious of everything that's going on in the company, and we're going to kind of get onto this in a minute, but being very conscious of what's going on in the company, you can actually like fix these things. But what I see happen very often is that there's outstanding issues which are kind of like an elephant in the room, and everyone kind of goes into a bit of like cognitive dissonance, and then they don't get addressed, and then people end up losing developers, and an interview process and things as well. Like the interview stage, these things like could sometimes not be addressed. So yeah, looking at superficial value, we need to hire Ruby developers and keep our existing ones. Let's pay 10 to 15K over the current market rates and hope for the best, versus looking at real value, we need to hire new Ruby developers and keep our existing ones. Let's take a very sober and conscious look at the real individual values of our employees and prospective employees, to what extent we're delivering or failing to deliver on them, and are there any ways that we're actually destroying value. The secret is to offer over 50% value, which is actually a difficult thing to do. If you can imagine trading with someone and giving and feeling like you get less, it's we don't actually like it. But if you can actually if you can be cool with giving more than 50% value to your developers, then yeah, it's a long term. You're more likely to keep them and build a happier team. So as a recruiter, this actually sounds counterintuitive, because I'm giving this advice because the money that I get is based on how much developers get, but the reality is the vast majority of my business comes from the teams who deliver on overall value. And like, yeah, it's like I often get it where I've got teams that are offering like senior developers like 65K for a role, but they've got everything together, and the whole package is great. And then there's other teams which maybe I don't know, their code base is completely out of shape. They've got like massive issues with kind of like a disconnect between upper management and the developers, and they're offering like 75, 80K, and developers will actually take the roles at 65K, like more often than not. So yeah, my hope is all Ruby teams in London create a very good value proposition, offering over 50% of value. We collectively steal all the best developers from San Francisco and Berlin, and the British Empire rises again. So all the English developers are like cool with that. Okay, so where's the value if it's not in the money? Basically how things are at work, how your employment affects your personal life and employment, and how your employment affects your personal identity. Decided to I got told I need to put like jokes in at every kind of like bit to keep people awake. So yeah. So the current status of the Ruby market is obviously Ruby's #1 language of choice for startups right now. It's actually kind of hammered at home, like having two people here looking for Ruby devs. LouisRoR, there's been people posting all week looking for Ruby devs. So I think that like it's literally in the last couple of months, it's actually gone up a notch in terms of like the demand. So yeah, obviously Ruby's #1 language of choice for startups right now. It's been that since at least sort of spring 2012. Shows no signs of being taken over anytime soon. There's established teams like .NET teams, PHP teams that are switching over on from those languages, and you've got big corporations that are rapidly adopting it, for instance, Skype. So this is a very rough, very inexact, massively overgeneralized, and possibly offensive hierarchy of Ruby developers. Please note the quality and quality of code supersedes years of development experience, which is somewhat arbitrary as a form of measurement, but we don't really have any other metric when kind of coming up with these generalized things. So yeah, I'm going to coin the term grandmasters here because people call them different things, but we're talking about like Ruby developers that typically got into Ruby pre-2008 and prior to that had many years of web development experience, had the foresight to see Rails potential back in the day before it became commercially viable. There's a very finite number of people that fit into this category, probably around 1 to 2% of developers. And I'd say there's probably only around 5 teams that I can think of off the top of my head that can take somebody of this level, because on a permanent salary, it's pretty high. Like it's like I think really top end. There's teams that will pay 100K for. So I think there's not that many that can take developers of that caliber. But the available developers are 0.3 recurring, or 1 every 4 to 6 months. I think actually are looking for permanent roles. I mean, majority of developers of this caliber are probably either like hardcore contractors, or they've got their own startups and they're doing their own thing. Senior developers typically got into Ruby around 2009 to 2011 as it's getting adopted and growing in notoriety. If uni was if they're coming from uni and their first jobs in Rails, they need to have started around 2010 to qualify as a senior developer. Again, this is completely arbitrary. It's like it completely changes. I mean, going back to this, I mean, I've met developers that have got 5 years of Ruby experience and thinking, oh God, they're going to be a complete badass. But then when it comes to actually like them doing interviews, like if you've been doing it in a really boring context, like, and you've just been doing sort of cookie cutter stuff on a daily basis, it can be that actually you're not that good. Whereas I've met people that have just been doing Rails for 1 year and like they're operating at like a phenomenal level. So yeah, I think a very good senior developer in another language could convert to a senior Ruby dev in probably around 1 to 2 years, depending on how good they are. Finite number is there's probably 1/3 to 1/4 the number of Rails teams in 2009 to 2011 as they are now. Does that correlate with everyone else's? Vacancies, I think there's probably around 40 to 50 vacancies right now, and I say that being that there's some teams that literally could hire like sort of 6 senior Ruby devs, and so I think, yeah, potentially if I had like 40, realistically you could probably place about 40 to 50 senior Ruby devs. And to be honest, like thinking about it now, I've said here there's around 2 to 4 senior devs in the marketplace at one time. I think it could actually be lower than that for permanent Ruby devs in the market. Mid-level developers, probably around 2 years of commercial experience in Ruby. If converting from something else, then decent prior experience, then a few weeks to a few months if they're already senior. Quite a few of these guys, sort of upper level ones, approaching senior are quite hard to find, but the lower level ones that have just graduated sort of a junior level, there's usually a good few on the market. There's usually a problem with like kind of lower level medium, kind of lower mid-level developers that I've forgotten the name of the law. That, you know, there's this thing where as soon as you begin to become competent in something, you kind of, it's called what, sorry? That's the one, yeah. I had it at the tip of my tongue. Yeah, Dunning-Kruger effect. It really kicks in. I mean, especially with guys in their 20s. I mean, I'm in my 20s, but I'm probably doing the same thing with recruitment right now. But yeah, lower mid-level developers generally like think they're the bee's knees, and it's not until they kind of and with everything that people hear about salaries, people kind of at that level kind of think that they're much better than they actually are. And quite often what will happen is people in that situation can kind of get a bit stuck. So I'd recommend anyone that's kind of a lower mid-level developer to stick it out of your current company and kind of hit a bit of a higher level, because in the demand for it, you can it's the better, more desirable Rails teams to work for are going to be hiring probably only for the upper mid-level ones, whereas yeah, the lower mid-levels there's less vacancies. But even still, in both scenarios, there's way more developers than there are. Decent junior developers. I'm going to skip some because I'm going to seriously, when I started putting all this together, I realized I've actually got way more content than time, and so I'll skip that. Uh, This doesn't take into account the viability of other skills and hybrid roles. Experience of early stage startups in another language can be very valuable. Sometimes poor experience is not. I don't even know I've written it. It's like some half-finished sentence, and now I've like moved on. Future supply and demand. It's been said, there was somebody who did a talk here, and they said that there's going to be loads of Ruby devs coming onto the market, so all you contractors better take nice permanent jobs right now before it's too late and everyone's getting paid 30K. It's true that PHP and .NET devs are converting to Ruby en masse. It's true that there's a huge number of graduates that are doing their dissertation in Ruby and plan that being their first commercial language, and they're already sort of planning their career in Ruby. And that you've got Ruby schools like Makers Academy and General Assembly, which are creating sort of around 20 to 30 junior/graduate level developers every 3 months. However, you've got teams that converted to it en masse. Most startups are using Ruby now. Most multinational, no, not most multinational companies, but a lot of multinational companies are starting to adopt it, and I think more will. New developers who are coming onto the market need time to get good. People who don't actually have, and this is the thing, right now pretty much everyone that's working with Ruby has got a real passion for it. We're starting to see like people that don't have a passion for it, that it's just a job, kind of like how the PHP market is now. We're starting to see that with Ruby. I don't think it's going to be a kind of a distinguished thing yet, but I think like maybe in a year's time it'll start to be like that. People like, I'll get managers saying, yeah, we want people that really love Ruby rather than people that are doing it sort of for a job. So contract and perm rates, I believe, will stay the same, as will the ratio of supply and demand. All developers in this room right now win, as you're already using Ruby and will outrank the people coming onto the market in the future. Hurrah. How do I get the best available devs and keep them? Offer all your devs 90K. Lot of joke. Value and flexibility. I mean, you've got like massive differences in working culture amongst teams. There's teams that I work with, and I'm not discriminating on age here, it's just kind of like how it works out. But there's teams where the most people are in their 20s, people are working like till late at night, they've got kind of a bit of a drinking culture like alongside it, and it's just kind of like hardcore hacking type sort of scenario. And then you've got other teams where you've got people that are a bit more mature, people with kids, and I guess for somebody with kids who lives a bit outside of London, if you've got a company which can offer you 4 days a week, you can offer flexible hours, so you can go and see your kids, like take them to school and stuff, and maybe even like sort of decent semi-remote or even remote, then like people will accept like 10, 15, 20K less if you get it right. Like I mean, the value of like kind of being able to sort of watch your kids grow up is potentially can be like way more than sort of material value. And at the same time, if you can accommodate developers' side product, I mean, Ruby is a very Rails is a very entrepreneurial language. Most developers I know have got some sort of startup idea bubbling away, and I think that when hiring for developers, a lot of companies will just kind of ignore and like almost like kind of imagine that their developers don't have these startup ideas. But if you can actually like sort of accommodate that, like by giving the 4-day week, by maybe even integrating it with the company somehow, then you can secure developers that might otherwise have just only considered working for you as a contractor. Obviously, you could go overboard with flexibility. I've heard of like horror stories in San Francisco where it's even worse out there, and like the salaries are even more inflated. Like I don't think that Ruby salaries are inflated. I think that the reason why Ruby developers get so much is because they spotted the technology early and they took a chance on it. But out in San Francisco, I've heard horror stories of developers like making like completely unreasonable demands and like craziness. But thankfully, it's not like that in the UK. And the other thing is, with this flexibility, as I said, you've got the potential to secure contractors, because if a contractor is only contracting because they want to work for 6 months, then do 6 months in the startup, then chances are you're not going to be able to secure them to work for you. But if they're contracting because it offers them another form of flexibility, and you can offer that flexibility in a permanent job, then you've got a shot at bringing them over to your as a permanent employee. Professional development, career progress, road mapping, etc. Contract. I mentioned contractors don't get this. If you're a mid-level, I wouldn't recommend being a contractor if you're a mid-level developer. I'd recommend any mid-level developer to be in a permanent job until they hit senior, because they're going to get to that senior level much quicker. I don't have any preference over, my business is like 50-50 contract to permanent, so I've got no like vested interests in either of them. But you've got the potential to make more of a name for yourself, especially like if you get involved with what a startup which makes it big and is highly visible. If we don't use our brains, they atrophy. Like there are some really some teams where they're actually they're doing the same thing, cookie cutter stuff, and they're likely to potentially lose their developers if they don't offer some sort of roadmap to development. Ownership. I think ownership's a big deal. Different companies can produce different levels of perception of ownership. Equity helps in getting a sense of ownership, but I've seen developers that really dislike their boss, dislike their job. They leave it, but they want the company to do well, so that the code that they've worked on for the last year goes in production. So I think if you can, by fostering a sense of ownership, you're going to help keep developers. Yukiro Matsumoto. There's a strong preference with permanent jobs for greenfield projects, especially amongst younger guys with people that are a bit older. It can be other. I mean, it's massive generalizations. This is just kind of what I've observed on a generalized basis. Less demands for late stage startup works unless there's new features, functionality, which satisfies the kind of urge for greenfield development. Some companies hiring for senior developers where there's a lot of refactoring to be done can struggle to attract devs. There are some teams that are in this situation right now. So, better things about functionality rather than tech. I say this is the other thing. If there's like unavoidable slogs, like we need to refactor this, it's going to take 4 months. By kind of creating a roadmap and basically like saying this is how it is, you're more likely to and basically showing light at the end of the tunnel. You are more likely to keep your developers like on board. Like I get calls from developers saying, look, this is what's happening. I want to move jobs. Like tell me what's going on the market. Relationships are massive. Have a deep think about the personality types that exist within the team, and have a think about who would fit that. I mean, if you're looking for new developers, have a good think about the developers that you've got, and actually actively target people that are like those developers. It's an organic thing, but kind of like attracts like. Decent CTO tech lead, strong, confident, kind of benevolent tribal leader type who takes care of everyone and ensuring everything gets done. Believing in the company and what they're doing. And then there's the kind of I have seen this a bit, like kind of I'm the boss type, sort of, which is maybe some sort of manifestation of their own insecurities. Being too meek, lacking in sort of direction and indecision. Developers not feeling like anyone's manning the helm and not being invested into the company themselves. 100%. The number one way teams lose developers is relationships breaking down. It's actually a good thing if you kind of have if tensions and things are aired within the team. I've heard of teams that have arguments on a regular basis, but it's kind of like a healthy thing. Loss of faith in the upper management. There's been a sort of a dev upper management disconnect is that can cause developers to leave en masse. Loss of faith in the project, production getting boring, underpaying developers as the market rate changes, feeling undervalued. And again, like number 5, that's not actually about not getting enough money. It's more about kind of the value that people get in the loss of value that people get in feeling like they're not being valued. Generally, there is an itch, there's some sort of human psychological thing that, after 4 years, people want to move on from their marriages and things. But yeah, it happens in development. Like, I have developers that ring me up, and it's like, I've I've been with this company for 4 years. I love everyone. Like, the company's awesome. It's doing really great. Like, I'm on a ridiculously good salary, but I'm bored. I want to move on. Like, and it's just, yeah, people just get this itch, and not feeling listened to, which I guess is part of like relationships. Peaks and troughs. No business, team, or company can run on a peak continuously. Peaks and troughs are cyclical in nature. So even the best teams, they're going to have like periods where people leave and things kind of go a bit wrong. If you get through it, it can make you a stronger team. It's good for founders' personal development and resilience. Whatever the outcome of the hard times, it's about the learning experience. So yeah, giving your CTOs, CTOs or tech leads or VP of engineering, whoever's like managing the developers needs like that is like they need to be. You need to have that right. Give them equity. Make sure they're bought in. Make sure they've got a good relationship with the upper management, especially during a crisis. More likely to stick it out through hard times if they're on board. Trust them and give them responsibilities. Make them work. They like it. I've actually heard this like like CTOs and stuff not feeling like they're working really. Sinking ships, pretty much. I've never seen this like. I've probably seen about 3 or 4 like Ruby teams which have like properly gone down and like people are leaving on like on a mass scale. Every single time it's not been through the fault of the CTO. Although having said this, I talk with the it's usually I hear about it from the CTO tech lead, so it's obviously not going to be their fault. Just got to work that out now. But from my perspective, what I've heard about it is it's usually it's the common recurring theme is the disconnect between the upper management and whoever's managing the developers. Yeah. Remote, semi-remote, getting awesome. To be honest, I could do like a whole talk about remote and semi-remote. We could have you guys like all say what objections you have to remote or semi-remote, and I can try and nullify them as best I can. But like at the end of the day, I've got developers like in the middle of like, I don't know, Cornwall or Derby, or like who live on farmland in Czech Republic, and they're happy to like come to the UK for like maybe 1 week in 4 or like 1 month in 3, but they're not in a position to live in London because they don't like London or they've got family with them. And these guys will, like, if they were on site in London, they'd probably be contractors, or they'd probably be like 70k permanent developers. And like I've had people like that are like in Poland, in Czech Republic, like happy with like 55k permanent salaries, and who will come to the UK on a regular basis and like when needed. But by offering them that on-site work, like you, as a team, you get a massive advantage over companies which are like hard and fast. We will only facilitate on-site developers, and at the same time, there's teams where, like, even if you're an existing like fully on-site team, there's teams that are starting to integrate remote workers to work with the on-site developers. And can get it right, so it can be done. But again, yeah, it's like there's a whole talk to be done about that. And these guys are loyal as well. If you've got somebody that's reliant on the remote work to be reliant on the remote work, and that there's not so many like teams which are offering them competing jobs, you're probably going to keep on to remote developers longer than you keep on to on-site permanent developers, where you've got recruiters just constantly spamming the hell out of LinkedIn with like crazy offers of like 85k permanent salaries and stuff. So plenty of success stories about remote teams need to be managed and put well in place. Whole team needs to get together in real life periodically. Usually not a problem, even if visa is an issue. Like if you've got decent developers from Ukraine, from Brazil, like there's some awesome developers in Ukraine and Brazil. You can get them over here for just with holiday visas, which I don't know if it's amazingly legal, but like I know people that do it, so it's like So, and yeah, you can stop. So, the way to test if remote or semi-remote's working, if you do it, and you're kind of like a CTO or you're is because I'm kind of aiming this talk at it's a weird amalgamation of like people that are founding Rails teams and people that are kind of like CTO tech leads. But the way to test remote working is basically to work remote yourself and see where are the pain points and see where the pain points are and see where the communication vacuums are. Gimmicks that don't work long time. Like, has anyone seen this film, The Internship? Nobody's seen it. It's like terrible. Like, it's like this weird like Google ad video, but like the it is. I remember like this whole like Google man-child playground thing is a bit overdone. Like, I've been to loads of offices where there's like all the foosballs tables and like Xboxes gathering dust and things, and it's kind of like, I've spoken to developers, and like often like developers don't really like it. Like they're kind of like they feel like the team's making up for something, or they feel like they're kind of being treated like a child or something for having this stuff. Now, pool tables and ping pong tables go down really well, so that's kind of different. I don't know why, but yeah. But a decent coffee machine is as well, and like. And again, like, to be honest, like, even if you've got like an Eastern Bloc style like office, which isn't amazing, if you've got the relationships down and you've got other things, then you can kind of overcome that. So I think the like niceties and stuff, like, it's kind of a side issue. So giving developers decent equipment to work on is pretty standard. Keep developers very happy by ensuring they have the latest version of Windows to install onto their MacBooks. Pro tip, get all your developers Microsoft Plus. I hear it's got some really nice screensavers, so yeah, they'll know you care. Catching other teams slipping. So yeah, interview fast. Generally people don't like doing loads of interviews. Like, I don't like doing loads of interviews personally. So I'd say most of the time, if a developer has a really good interview, they really like the company, they come in with a strong, decent offer right off the bat, then like pretty much I'll say, look, do you want to interview with these other teams that I've arranged for you, or like, how do you want to respond to this offer? And I'll be like, do you know what, I just want to go with it, it's fine. And like, without even seeing the other teams. And this happens on a daily basis. So interviewing fast is like, will give you a massive advantage. I've had it loads of times where candidates with really poor interview skills get overlooked when they're actually quite good. And after they've had like feedback a couple of times, like after we've got feedback and we see what the recurring problem is, I take them out for a cup of coffee and like and we talk about the interviews and we work out what they're actually doing wrong. And then the next interview, like, they get it straight away. So yeah, like kind of trying to see past where developers are going wrong. European devs with decent academic English but with lack of experience using the language can be overlooked, because quite often like people that appear to not have good English will actually have really good English after about like, I don't know, maybe 5 months or something, maybe even less, because they've learned the skills, they just haven't been able to like put them into practice enough. If you can, visas aren't that difficult to get. It's just time consuming, and it's just a bit of hassle. But if you go through it, you've got a massive advantage. Flexibility, devs come converted from other languages. Strive for an open work culture. Encourage a culture of open communication. If your developers have their own projects and start ideas, encourage them to bring this stuff into the open rather than suppressing it underground. If your developers are saying, look, we've got an idea and actually it's going to go, it could actually come to fruition in 3 months' time, then you've got a head start on recruiting, and potentially you could even work out some sort of arrangement whereby they still work for you. Secretive work culture can cause unexpected mass exoduses if coupled with other issues that we've talked about. Having arguments is good. Don't make devs ask for more pay. Between junior and senior, pay goes up roughly 10K a year. If a dev has to ask for a pay rise to be in line with what they can get if they switch jobs, you as a team lose social capital. Companies look cheap. Developers feel undervalued and having to fight what you get. So if a developer gets a pay rise in line with what they would get elsewhere without asking for it, then you gain social capital and the company appears generous, the dev feels cared for and valued, and it has the same overall effect in terms of on your budget, but not on the dev staying or not. How to convert a contractor to a permanent employee. Obviously, like this is not going to happen every time, but don't start by trying to nail contractors down at the interview saying, if things go well, would you like to work for us permanently? Which, like, most, like, and contractors, like, there's loads of contractors, and they hate it. Like, they tell me, they're like, oh, God, it was going really well, and they're bloody asked this, like, and they basically, it got to the point last year that the contractors were saying to me that they have to start lying and being like, yeah, I might work for you guys. But like they're obviously not, and the contractors are honest, were worried about not getting the contract. It's different now because there's probably there's way more contracts than there are even contract developers. So, yeah, it's like trying to F on the first date. So but it can be done if you find out what the contractor likes about contracting, and that's actually something that you can offer them, then you've got a chance at actually bringing them on board by just treating them really nicely and and engineering it in the right way. Don't be sore if they don't go for it. It's not a long-term strategy, just worth doing if you have contractors in on the off chance they go for it. Conclusion, how to have a good Ruby team. Think about people above all else. Put the personal needs of staff first, costs and processes second, focus on the relationship, include everyone, list of complaints, care about development, foster a genuine interest in what your developers are doing, have the attitude that you want to learn and do better as a team, be really good at communication, encourage developers to be chatty, Onsite Remote, seriously over-communicate, make the most of tools which are in place to ensure communication is easy, like MSN Messenger, ICQ, Yahoo Messenger, MySpace, and Bebo. Other things that I'd have loved to have covered, but I didn't have enough time. Like I could do a whole thing on remote developers. How, like, obviously, like I've never run a Ruby team myself, so I don't know how to actually manage remote developers. But I kind of hear about everything from a second-hand perspective, so I can talk about general kind of like patterns of what appears to work. Semi-remote as well. There's semi-remote and remote are different kettles of fish entirely. Building up juniors and keep them with you long term is another viable way of staffing a team, and doing the same thing kind of with people converting from other languages. Hiring DevOps, front end iOS and Android developers, dealing with recruiters as well. Like there's a lot kind of I can go into that. If anyone wants to know this stuff, just send me a message or something. And building and managing the company image for developers. So yeah, I just wanted to leave one last picture of DHH, and I'm LouisRoR on Twitter. If anyone here plays Team Fortress 2, I play that kind of as much as I work, so send me an email if you play a lot of that. And yeah, thank you very much. Yes. I reconcile that is that historically it's only been the last couple of months where there's been the massive mid-level contracts. Most of the contracts prior to the last couple of months were predominantly senior. I think that you are right, and it is a big generalization, but the working in a decent permanent team where you've got the space to muck about with different technologies and to really kind of like work out things can be a lot more productive than working in it really depends on the contract, but I just say as a general rule, you're going to get better contracts. And the other thing is, if the contract market does take a dip, which it may the permanent Ruby market has been on a very kind of steep inclination. The contract market it kind of waxes and wanes. So the people that lose out in the contracts market are mid-level developers, because when the contract market wanes, then the senior developers are still good, but the mid-level developers are not in as much demand. I think the other thing for mid-level developers taking contracts is if it's a team which has wanted a senior contract developer and they've settled for a mid-level developer, then mid-level developers can quite quickly get thrown in at the deep end, which can actually be good, I guess, for some developers, but also at the same time it can have a bit of a negative impact on things. But yeah, there's a whole discussion to be had about that.